I stood at JFK's bustling Terminal 4, my hand resting lightly on the handle of the luggage cart. Around me, the constant hum of movement and conversation filled the air. Travelers, laden with suitcases plastered with stickers from far-off places, brushed past as they hurried to their gates. But in that moment, none of it mattered. My focus was solely on Elena and Liam. Elena, my wife of 10 years, was busy adjusting the strap on Liam's backpack. Her dark brown hair, always so perfectly styled, gleamed under the fluorescent airport lights, cascading over the shoulders of her fitted beige trench coat. She looked radiant, like a scene out of a magazine. Barcelona-born and effortlessly elegant, Elena had always carried herself with a quiet confidence. It was what first drew me to her all those years ago. I could still remember the day we met, July 18, 2012. It was a blistering summer afternoon, and Central Park was alive with music and laughter. I'd gone to a jazz festival with some friends, never imagining that one chance encounter would change my life forever. Elena was there with a group of Spanish tourists, her laughter cutting through the noise like a melody. She was arguing with a vendor over the price of a handmade bracelet, switching between Spanish and English so fluidly it left me stunned. I had no idea where the sudden courage came from, but I walked over and introduced myself. She looked at me with those warm, expressive eyes, and I was hooked. By the time the sun set over the park, we were sitting on a picnic blanket, talking about everything from her dreams of becoming a graphic designer to my ambitions of climbing the corporate ladder in marketing. She was visiting New York for just 2 weeks, but by the time she left, we both knew we had something special. 2 years later, I proposed on the Amalfi Coast, under a sky so blue it looked painted. She cried when I slipped the ring on her finger, saying, "Yes, John, 1,000 times yes." Life since then had felt like a fairy tale, or so I thought. "Elena," I said, snapping out of the memory, "are you sure you've got everything?" I glanced at the sleek Toomey suitcase she'd insisted on buying for this trip, packed meticulously as always. She looked up at me, her lips curving into that easy smile I'd fallen for. "Yes, John," she said with an exaggerated sigh. "For the 5th time, I've got everything." Her voice still carried that soft Spanish lilt, even after all these years in New York. Liam, our 6-year-old, was bouncing with excitement. He'd been talking about this trip to Spain for weeks, thrilled at the thought of visiting his cousins and playing on the beaches of Costa Brava. He looked up at me, his brown eyes, so much like Elena's, shining with joy. "Daddy, are you sure you don't want to come?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mix of hope and disappointment. I crouched down to his level, adjusting the cap he insisted on wearing backward. "I wish I could, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. "But I have to work. Someone's got to keep the lights on at home." "Don't worry," he said, puffing out his chest. "I'll take care of Mommy." Elena laughed softly, reaching down to touch Liam's cheek. "I told you. He's been saying that all morning." Final boarding call for Flight 982 to Barcelona, came the announcement over the loudspeakers. Elena checked her phone and then looked at me. "We'd better go," she said, her tone soft but firm. I hugged Liam tightly, whispering, "Be good for Mommy, okay?" He nodded vigorously, and I stood to face Elena. "I'll miss you," I said, leaning in for a kiss. She hesitated for the briefest moment. So brief I wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't been looking at her so intently. Then, she kissed me back. "We'll call you when we land," she promised. I watched them go through security, standing there until I couldn't see them anymore. Elena turned back once, waving and smiling. That smile, it was the kind of smile that made you believe everything was exactly as it should be. I waited until their flight was airborne, following the plane's progress on the airport monitors. Satisfied they were safely on their way, I walked back to the parking garage, already thinking about what I'd do with the quiet weekend ahead. Maybe catch up on some work, or finally binge-watch that show Liam kept saying I should watch. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Pulling it out, I saw a message from Elena. "John, I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back. Please don't try to contact me." I froze, rereading the message over and over, hoping I'd misunderstood. My chest tightened as I tried to call her, but the call went straight to voicemail. I opened WhatsApp to send her a message, only to realize she'd blocked me. My hands trembled as I opened our joint bank account. The balance was nearly zero. Thousands of dollars gone, transferred to an account I didn't recognize. I slumped into the driver's seat, staring blankly at the dashboard. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. The woman I'd built my life around, the woman I'd kissed goodbye less than an hour ago, was gone, and she had taken my son with her. Chapter 2. The search begins. I sat in the sterile, fluorescent-lit office of the Westchester Police Department, my hands clenched so tightly on the edge of the desk that my knuckles turned white. Across from me sat Officer Daniel Reyes, a middle-aged man with a neatly trimmed mustache and a sympathetic, weathered face. His badge gleamed under the harsh light as he scribbled in a notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration. "So let me get this straight," Reyes said, looking up at me. "Your wife and son boarded the plane at JFK. You watched them pass security, saw the plane take off, and then she texted you that she was leaving and blocked all contact. Correct?" I nodded, my throat dry. "That's right. And the money? She emptied our joint account. Thousands of dollars gone. She took everything." Reyes leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "You said the flight was to Barcelona?" Reyes sighed and exchanged a glance with his partner, Detective Angela Carter, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 30s who had been silently observing me. She had a notebook of her own, but her focus seemed more on me than on taking notes, as if she were trying to read between the lines of my desperation. "We'll need to check the airline's passenger manifest," Carter said, her voice calm but firm, "and we'll contact authorities in Spain. But you should know that cases like this, well, they can be complicated. If she left willingly and took your son, it's not necessarily a crime. At least, not yet." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "She kidnapped my son," I said, my voice rising. "Liam didn't have a choice. He's only 6. How is that not a crime?" Reyes raised a hand, signaling for calm. "I understand this is difficult, Mr. Morgan, but these cases require evidence and jurisdictional cooperation. We'll do everything we can." I felt like I was suffocating. The room seemed to close in around me. "I don't care how difficult it is," I snapped. "Just find my son." The next few days blurred together. Every moment I wasn't on the phone or at the police station, I was scouring the internet for any lead I could find. My sister, Karen, a lawyer in Boston, flew down to help me. She was a no-nonsense type, always the pragmatic voice in the family, and I needed her more than ever. "John, you need to keep a clear head," Karen said as she sat across from me at my kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her. She was researching international custody laws, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Interpol has a protocol for cases like this. If Elena took Liam out of the country illegally, they'll issue a red notice. But it takes time." "Time?" I snapped. "Karen, she has my son. She could be anywhere by now." Karen looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and frustration. "I know you're scared, but panicking won't help. Let's focus on what we can do." She was right, of course, but it didn't make the waiting any easier. Days turned into a week, and the police hit their first roadblock. Neither Elena nor Liam had entered Spanish territory. Their names didn't appear on the passenger list for the connecting flight from Frankfurt to Barcelona, and the Spanish authorities confirmed they hadn't landed at any of their airports. "What does that mean?" I demanded during my next meeting with Reyes and Carter. "They just disappeared into thin air?" "It means they likely never intended to go to Spain," Carter said, her tone professional but tinged with compassion. "The connecting flight may have been a decoy to throw us off." The revelation made my stomach churn. Elena had planned this down to the last detail. She had lied to me, to Liam, to everyone, and now she was gone without a trace. Desperate for answers, I turned to a private investigator, Marcus Hale, a retired NYPD detective with a reputation for finding people who didn't want to be found. Marcus was gruff and no-nonsense, the kind of guy who'd seen it all and didn't waste time sugarcoating things. "You're dealing with someone who knows what she's doing," Marcus said as we sat in his small, cluttered office in downtown Manhattan. "She's smart, she's careful, and she's got a head start. But everyone leaves a trail, Mr. Morgan. The trick is finding it." He started with the bank account Elena had used to transfer our money. It was a shell account, routed through multiple banks to obscure its origin. Marcus also began digging into Elena's online activity, combing through every piece of data he could find. Late one night, as I sat alone in the living room, staring blankly at the wedding photo on the mantel, Marcus called with his first lead. "She left something behind, didn't she?" he asked. "What do you mean?" I said, confused. "Electronics," Marcus clarified. "A laptop, a tablet, anything she might have used to plan this." It hit me then, Elena's old tablet. She'd gotten a newer model 6 months ago and hadn't touched the old one since. I rummaged through the storage closet, pulling out the dusty device. My hands shook as I powered it on, praying it would hold some clue. Sure enough, Elena was still logged into her Facebook account. My heart pounded as I scrolled through her messages, looking for anything that might explain why she'd done this. That's when I saw his name, Hassan. The messages were scattered, parts of them deleted, but the context was clear. She had been talking to him for months, maybe longer. The first message was from months ago, casual enough to pass for innocent. Asterisk, "Hola, Hassan. How's Morocco?" Asterisk. The reply came minutes later, dripping with familiarity. Asterisk, "Better now that you're talking to me, Preciosa." Asterisk. My heart sank as I scrolled further. Their conversations were flirtatious, playful at first, but they quickly escalated into something darker. Hassan called her mi amor, sent her photos of himself lounging shirtless on a beach, and praised her beauty in ways that made my stomach churn. Elena responded with photos of her own. Images that started as simple selfies but grew more intimate, more revealing. By the time I reached the most recent messages, I felt sick. One photo showed Elena lying on our bed, dressed in nothing but a slip I'd bought her for Valentine's Day last year. She had sent it to Hassan just 2 weeks before she disappeared. My hands gripped the edges of the tablet, so tightly I thought I might break it. I didn't hesitate. I called Marcus Hale, the private investigator, and told him what I'd found. "Send me screenshots," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I'll start digging into this guy. What do you know about him so far?" "Nothing concrete," I admitted. "Just his name, Hassan. He's in Morocco, and it's obvious he and Elena were having an affair." "All right," Marcus said. "I'll see what I can pull up. If he's using social media like this, he's probably left a trail." Within hours, Marcus called back, his tone grim. "We've got a profile on this guy," he said. "Hassan El-Aziz. He's not just some random fling, John. He's a predator." My heart sank further as Marcus detailed what he had found. Hassan was a known con artist, deported from the United States 5 years ago for visa fraud. Since then, he had been operating in Europe and North Africa, targeting women through social media and dating platforms. His method was always the same: charm them, earn their trust, and then exploit them. "He's been doing this for years," Marcus said. "He finds women, lonely, vulnerable women, and convinces them they're in a relationship. They send him money, gifts, sometimes even compromising photos or videos. Then he blackmails them for more." The words hit me like a freight train. "You're saying Elena, she fell for this?" "It's not just her, John," Marcus continued. "This guy has dozens of victims. Some of them are still paying him off to keep their secrets safe." I closed my eyes, trying to process it all. The woman I had loved, the mother of my child, had been pulled into this man's web of lies and manipulation. And now she had taken Liam with her, likely believing Hassan's promises of a better life. The next day, I met Detective Carter at the precinct, bringing everything I'd found. Her expression hardened as she flipped through the screenshots of Elena's messages and photos. "This guy is dangerous," Carter said, "and he's clearly a professional. We'll coordinate with Interpol and the Moroccan authorities to track him down. Is there any chance this will lead us to Liam?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "It's possible," Carter said, her tone cautious. "But Hassan covers his tracks well. It might take time to pinpoint his location." Time. The word felt like a death sentence. Every moment that passed, Liam was further away from me, deeper into whatever life Elena had chosen for him. In the meantime, Marcus continued to dig deeper. He found forums and social media groups where women shared their experiences with Hassan. The stories were eerily similar. He'd come into their lives like a whirlwind, promising love and adventure, only to leave them with empty bank accounts and shattered trust. One woman, Sophie, agreed to speak with me. She was a French national who had met Hassan 3 years ago. Over coffee at a small cafe in Midtown, she told me her story. "He was so charming," Sophie said, her eyes glassy as she stirred her cappuccino. "He made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. But then he started asking for money. Small amounts at first, then more. When I said no, he threatened to send photos I had shared with him to my family." "Did he ever mention Elena?" I asked, my voice tight. Sophie shook her head. "No, but he always had other women. I think that's how he survives, juggling multiple relationships at once. He doesn't care about anyone but himself." Her words confirmed what I already knew. Hassan didn't love Elena. He was using her. But Elena had put her faith in him, and now Liam was caught in the crossfire. Back at home, I sat in the dark, the tablet still in my lap. I stared at the screen, at the messages that had shattered my world. Elena's betrayal was undeniable, but underneath the anger was something deeper. Sadness. Sadness for the woman I thought I knew. Sadness for Liam, who was being dragged into a life he didn't choose. And sadness for myself, for the man who had built his life around a lie. But as the night wore on, sadness gave way to something else. Resolve. Hassan had taken everything from me, but I wasn't going to let him win. I would find Liam. I would bring him home. And I would make sure Hassan never hurt anyone else again. The hunt was far from over. It was just beginning. Late on Sunday night, as I sat in the dim light of my living room, the soft buzz of Elena's forgotten tablet startled me. I grabbed it instinctively, and my chest tightened when I saw the notification. A new message from her sister, Sophia. For a moment, I stared at the screen, unsure if I was ready to open it. Then, steeling myself, I tapped the message. "Elena, how are you and Liam settling in Turkey? Did the apartment work out okay?" The word struck me like a physical blow. Turkey, not Spain. My breath caught in my throat, and my mind raced. Sophia knew exactly where Elena and Liam were. She had known all along. I wanted to call Sophia immediately, demand answers, confront her for her betrayal. But I stopped myself. Confronting her now could tip her off, and if she alerted Elena, it would only make things harder. Instead, I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Marcus Hale and Detective Carter, attaching a short note. "They're in Turkey. Please act fast." The next morning, Marcus called, his voice tinged with urgency. "John, this is a solid lead. I've already flagged it with Interpol and the Turkish authorities. If they're in Antalya, we'll find them." "How long will it take?" I asked, pacing my living room. My hands felt clammy, and my chest tightened with every second of silence. "It depends on how quickly the Turkish authorities can verify their entry," Marcus said. "But Antalya's airport is heavily monitored. If they landed there, there'll be a record." That waiting period was agonizing. Each hour stretched endlessly as I hovered between cautious hope and the crippling fear that Liam was slipping further from my grasp. It took 3 days before the call came. Detective Carter was the one to deliver the news. "We've confirmed it, John," she said. "Elena and Liam landed at Antalya Airport 2 weeks ago. They traveled from Frankfurt on a direct flight." I exhaled sharply, relief and anger mingling in my chest. "And since then?" "They stayed at a short-term rental near the airport for a week before moving into an apartment in the city center," Carter explained. "Turkish authorities have surveillance footage showing their movements. Liam was recently enrolled in a local school. The thought of my son starting school in a foreign country without me, surrounded by strangers, filled me with a fresh wave of determination. What's the next step?" Carter hesitated for a moment. "Interpol and Turkish authorities are coordinating. If you're ready, we can arrange for you to travel to Antalya and work with local law enforcement. They'll guide you through the process. Ready?" I said, gripping the phone tighter. "I'll leave tonight." The flight to Antalya was long and restless. I barely slept, the weight of the situation pressing down on me like an iron shroud. The Turkish Airlines flight attendants were polite, but their warm smiles and offers of tea barely registered. I spent most of the journey staring at Liam's photo on my phone, replaying memories of his laugh, his questions about the world, the way he'd climb onto my lap with his favorite book. When the plane landed, the Mediterranean air was warm and humid, a stark contrast to the icy knot in my chest. At the terminal, I was met by Captain Mehmet Arslan and Officer Leyla Demir, two Turkish officials who had been briefed on the case. Mehmet was tall and broad-shouldered, his stern expression softened by kind eyes. Leyla, younger but equally professional, exuded quiet competence. "Mr. Morgan," Mehmet greeted me, extending his hand. "Welcome to Antalya. We understand this is a difficult situation for you." "Difficult doesn't even begin to cover it," I said. My voice was tight, but I forced myself to stay composed. "Do you know where my son is?" Mehmet nodded. "Yes, he is safe. We've confirmed his school and their current residence. We will proceed with caution to ensure his well-being." Leyla stepped forward. "Our goal is to reunite you with your son as quickly and smoothly as possible. However, Turkish law requires us to follow specific protocols, especially in cases involving international families." I nodded, though my patience was wearing thin. "I just want my son back." We drove through Antalya's busy streets, the city a mix of modern high-rises and ancient ruins. Palm trees lined the boulevards, and the turquoise waters of the Mediterranean glimmered in the distance. But I barely noticed any of it. My focus was on Liam. Our first stop was the school where Liam had been enrolled. The plan was straightforward. Mehmet and Leyla would accompany me to the school, where we'd confirm Liam's safety before taking him into protective custody. Turkish authorities would then contact Elena. As we approached the school, my heart pounded so loudly it drowned out the sound of the car engine. The building was modest but colorful, with cheerful murals on the walls and a small playground in the back. My eyes darted across the yard, scanning the children playing outside. And then I saw him. Liam was sitting at a table near the swings, his head down as he concentrated on a drawing. His small frame, his familiar posture, I would have recognized him anywhere. "Liam," I called out, stepping out of the car. He looked up, his wide brown eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, he froze, as if unsure if what he was seeing was real. Then he bolted toward me, his face lighting up with a smile that brought tears to my eyes. "Daddy!" he cried, throwing himself into my arms. I held him tightly, my hand cradling the back of his head as he buried his face in my shoulder. "I've got you, buddy," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I've got you." Liam clung to me, his small body shaking with sobs. "I missed you, Daddy," he said. "I want to go home." Hearing those words, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. "We're going home," I promised him. "You're safe now." Mehmet and Leyla stood nearby, giving us space but keeping a watchful eye. "We'll take you to a secure location," Leyla said gently. I nodded, still holding Liam close. The fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Liam was back in my arms, and I would do whatever it took to keep him there. As Liam and I sat together in the small hotel room overlooking Antalya's bustling streets, the first rays of dawn filtered through the thin curtains. He was curled up next to me on the couch, his small hands clutching a plush toy I'd brought from home. One of the few things I thought to pack in my frantic rush. I watched him carefully, his face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Daddy," he said quietly, breaking the silence. "Yes, buddy?" I replied, brushing a hand through his unruly hair. "I don't like it here." His voice wavered, and his eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to be in Turkey anymore." I pulled him closer, wrapping my arm around his shoulders. "It's okay, Liam," I said softly. "You're safe now, and we're going to go home soon. I promise." He looked up at me, his lip quivering. "Everything is different here. I don't understand what people are saying. The food is weird." And, he hesitated, as if afraid to continue. "It's okay, Liam," I encouraged. "You can tell me anything." He took a shaky breath. "Hassan makes us pray all the time," he whispered. "And he gets mad when I don't do it right." My jaw tightened as I tried to keep my anger in check. "What do you mean, buddy? What does he make you do?" Liam shifted uncomfortably, hugging his plush toy tighter. "We have to kneel on this rug, and he says all these words I don't understand. If I mess up, he yells at me." Mommy says I should listen to him, but I don't like it. The thought of Hassan imposing his beliefs on Liam, of forcing him into rituals he didn't understand, made my blood boil. But I kept my voice calm for Liam's sake. You don't have to do anything you don't want to, I said firmly. Not anymore. I'm here now. As the hours passed, Liam began to open up more about their life in Turkey. He talked about the small apartment they'd been staying in, with its bare walls and a single bedroom where he and Elena shared a mattress on the floor. It's not like home, he said, his voice small. I miss my bed. I miss my toys. What about school? I asked gently. Liam frowned. The kids are nice, but I can't talk to them. They don't speak English. He described how isolated he felt, how even the simplest things, like asking to use the bathroom or playing on the playground, felt like an uphill battle. My heart ached for him. And Hassan? I pressed carefully. Liam's expression darkened. He's always around. He's mean, Daddy. He yells at Mommy a lot. Sometimes she cries. I clenched my fists, struggling to suppress the anger bubbling inside me. I needed to stay composed for Liam's sake, but every word he said only reinforced my resolve to end this nightmare. Later that day, I met with Captain Mehmet and Officer Layla to share what Liam had told me. The three of us sat in the hotel's small conference room, the air heavy with tension. Hassan's behavior is controlling and abusive, I said, my voice tight. He's forcing his beliefs on Liam, isolating him, and making his life miserable. And Elena? I paused, exhaling sharply. She's not herself. Liam says she's crying all the time. Layla nodded, her expression grim. It's a common tactic among men like Hassan. They manipulate their victims, isolate them from their support systems, and impose their rules to maintain control. He's using religion as a tool to dominate them, Mehmet added. It's not uncommon in cases like this. It creates a power dynamic that's difficult to break. I stared at the table, my hands gripping the edge. I can't leave Liam in that environment, I said firmly. He doesn't belong there. He belongs at home, with me. Layla placed a reassuring hand on my arm. You're doing everything right, Mr. Morgan, she said. The Turkish authorities are fully aware of the situation, and we're working to ensure Liam's safety. Hassan's behavior will not be tolerated. Mehmet leaned forward. For now, focus on Liam. Spend time with him. Reassure him. We'll handle the legal side of things. That evening, Liam and I took a walk along Antalya's marina, the sun casting a golden glow over the turquoise waters of the Mediterranean. Fishing boats bobbed gently in the harbor, and the smell of grilled fish wafted from nearby restaurants. For the first time in weeks, Liam seemed to relax. He pointed out the colorful boats and asked questions about the towering cliffs in the distance. Are we really going home, Daddy? He asked as we sat on a bench overlooking the water. Soon, I promised, wrapping an arm around him. We'll go home, and everything will be okay. But even as I said the words, I knew the battle wasn't over. Hassan's control over Elena and Liam ran deep, and I would have to fight tooth and nail to bring my son home for good. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I held Liam close and silently vowed to protect him, no matter what it took. I was sitting in the hotel room with Liam when the call came through. Mehmet's voice was calm but direct. Elena arrived at the school this afternoon, he said. She was informed that Liam was taken into protective custody. She went straight to the police station and attempted to file a report. She's now under arrest for child abduction. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It was a step forward, but it didn't feel like a victory. Not yet. What happens now? I asked. She'll be released on bail, Mehmet explained. Her accounts have been frozen as part of the investigation. She has no financial means and cannot leave Turkey. If you wish to speak with her, this might be the best time. I stared at Liam, who was playing with his toy cars on the floor, oblivious to the storm still raging around us. I didn't want to confront her. I didn't even want to look at her. But part of me knew I had to. I needed closure. I needed to hear the truth. I'll meet her at the station, I said finally. The ride to the police station was surreal. I sat in the back of an unmarked car, the city passing by in a blur. My mind raced with everything I wanted to say to Elena, everything I needed to know. Why had she done this? How could she betray me so completely? When I arrived, Mehmet met me at the entrance and led me inside. Elena was sitting in the lobby, her polished exterior completely undone. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smeared, and her expression hollow. It was a far cry from the confident, elegant woman I had once loved. Her head snapped up when she saw me. "John," she said, her voice shaking. "Where's Liam?" "He's safe," I replied, my voice cold and even, "and far away from you and Hassan." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't let myself feel anything. Not pity, not anger, nothing. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "He's my son too." I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. "I'm doing this because Liam deserves better, and because you left me no choice." I pulled the folder from under my arm and dropped it on the table in front of her. "Take a look, Elena. This is the man you threw your life away for." She hesitated, her hands trembling as she opened the folder. I watched her face as she flipped through the pages. Photos of Hassan with other women, financial records of money he'd extorted, and transcripts of messages where he bragged about his conquests. This can't be true," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's all true," I said, my tone hard. "Hassan doesn't love you. He never did. You're just another name on his list. Another victim. He's been manipulating you this whole time." Her tears spilled over as she slammed the folder shut. "I didn't know," she said, sobbing. I thought he loved me." I crossed my arms, forcing myself to meet her gaze. "And what about me, Elena? Did you ever love me?" She froze, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then, in a voice so soft I almost didn't hear it, she said, "I married you to get to America." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't flinch. "You were kind," she continued, her voice cracking. "You gave me stability, a home, everything I thought I wanted. But Hassan, he made me feel alive. He's more sensitive, more attentive, more," she hesitated, looking away, "more passionate." I stared at her, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "And now look where that passion got you," I said, my voice cutting. "You're alone, broke, and facing charges that could ruin your life." She broke down completely, her sobs echoing in the small room. "I made a mistake," she whispered. "I ruined everything." For a moment, I felt nothing but disgust. Then I thought of Liam, my son, her son, caught in the middle of this mess. I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "You didn't just ruin your life, Elena. You nearly ruined Liam's. And I won't let that happen." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "John, please." But I didn't let her finish. I stood, gathered the folder, and turned toward the door. "Goodbye, Elena," I said without looking back. As I stepped outside, the warm Mediterranean air hit me like a bomb. For the first time in weeks, I felt lighter, as if some invisible weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I had my son. I had the truth. And now, I had the chance to rebuild. Elena had made her choices. Now, it was time for me to make mine. Chapter 7. A Father's Triumph. The journey back to America felt like stepping out of one life and into another. Liam sat beside me on the flight, his head resting against my arm as he dozed off. I couldn't stop staring at him, marveling at how small and vulnerable he looked, yet how much strength he'd shown through all of this. I had his new passport tucked securely in my jacket pocket, a tangible symbol of his return to safety and normalcy. As the plane descended over New York, the skyline emerging through a haze of clouds, I felt a sense of resolve I hadn't known before. This was a new beginning, not just for Liam but for me too. Back in Westchester, the first thing I did was file for divorce. My lawyer, Emily Price, was sharp, efficient, and relentless. She'd handled cases like mine before and assured me that with the evidence I had, Elena's abandonment, her involvement with Hassan, and her arrest in Turkey, I was in a strong position to secure full custody of Liam. "Elena's actions show a clear pattern of instability and neglect," Emily said as we sat in her office, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "The courts will take that very seriously. You're doing the right thing by filing now." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was regaining control. As the legal process unfolded, there was another confrontation I couldn't avoid. Sophia. I hadn't spoken to her since discovering her message to Elena, but the anger I felt toward her betrayal simmered every time I thought about it. She had known where Elena was all along, and had chosen to protect her at the expense of Liam and me. I called her one evening, my voice sharp as I asked her to meet me at a cafe in the city. When she arrived, her expression was a mix of guilt and defiance. "John," she said cautiously as she sat down. "Sophia," I replied curtly, my arms crossed. "I think you know why we're here." She looked away, fidgeting with the bracelet on her wrist. "If this is about Elena—" "It's not just about Elena," I interrupted. "It's about you. You knew where she was. You knew what she was doing, and you didn't say a word. Do you have any idea what that put Liam through? What it put me through?" Sophia flinched but didn't respond. "You betrayed me," I said, my voice rising. "You sided with her, knowing full well she was breaking the law and endangering my son." "I didn't want to get involved," Sophia said defensively. "Elena is my sister. What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to do the right thing," I shot back. "Instead, you helped her hide. And for what? To protect your precious family secret?" Her face paled. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, my tone sharp and deliberate. "I know about your marriage, Sophia. I know you married your husband for citizenship, just like Elena married me. And I'm sure he'll be very interested to hear about that." Her eyes widened, panic flickering across her face. "John, you wouldn't." "I already have," I said coldly. "He deserves to know the truth, just like I did." The next day, I made a decision. I couldn't let this lie fester, not when Mark, a man who had always been kind to me, and Liam, deserved to know the truth. I called him and arranged to meet at a coffee shop in the city. Mark arrived promptly, his usual calm demeanor tinged with curiosity. He was a tall man in his early 40s, with salt and pepper hair and a quiet confidence that made him approachable. "John," he greeted me, extending a hand. "Good to see you. What's this about?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure how to start. "Mark, I'm sorry to put you in this position, but there's something you need to know about Sophia." His brow furrowed, and he leaned forward. "What is it?" I pulled out the tablet and opened the chat, turning the screen toward him. "I found this in Elena's messages." Sophia knew where Elena and Liam were the entire time. She was helping her. Mark's face darkened as he read the messages. "She knew," he said quietly, his voice laced with disbelief. "She didn't just know," I said, my tone measured. "She encouraged it. She even helped Elena plan how to hide from me." Mark shook his head, his jaw tightening. "I can't believe this. I've been living with her, trusting her, and she's been—" "What? Covering for Elena while lying to me?" I took a deep breath. "Mark, there's more." I scrolled further and showed him the messages about Sophia's own papers. "She admitted to Elena that her marriage to you was part of a plan. She married you for citizenship." Mark's face fell, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "She used me," he said, the realization hitting him like a freight train. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "You didn't deserve this, Mark. None of us did." For a moment, Mark was silent, staring at the chat on the screen. Then he exhaled sharply, his expression hardening. "Thank you for telling me, John," he said, his voice steady but cold. "I need to deal with this." A week later, I heard from Mark again. He had confronted Sophia with the evidence, and she hadn't denied it. Instead, she had tried to justify her actions, claiming that she had done what she had to do to build a life for herself. Mark wasn't having it. "I filed for divorce," he told me over the phone. His voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it. "She's out of the house. I can't stay married to someone who's lied to me for years." The fallout was swift and brutal. Sophia's carefully constructed life began to crumble. Her social circle, built on the foundation of her marriage to Mark, quickly turned against her when the truth came out. Mark, respected and well-liked, had no trouble rallying support from friends and family. Life didn't change overnight. There were moments when the weight of everything we'd been through seemed unbearable, quiet nights when Liam would wake up from a bad dream, his small voice calling out for me, or days when I'd catch myself staring at a family photo on the mantel, wondering how things had gone so wrong. But those moments grew fewer with time, replaced by the steady rhythm of a life rebuilt piece by piece. For Liam's sake, I threw myself into creating a stable, happy home. Our mornings began with routines that I'd once taken for granted. Making breakfast together in the kitchen, his giggles echoing as he tried to flip pancakes with far too much enthusiasm. On school days, I'd pack his lunch with little notes tucked inside, a simple, "Have a great day," or a doodle of his favorite superhero. It was small, but it reminded him he was loved. After school, we'd find ways to fill our time with joy. Weekends were sacred, our chance to escape into the world of parks, playgrounds, and adventures. Central Park became a favorite spot, its sprawling lawns and colorful carousel offering Liam a place to run free. I watched him laugh, climb trees, and make friends with the same boundless energy he'd always had. It felt like a victory every time I saw that smile. Evenings became our sanctuary. We'd build elaborate pillow forts in the living room, stacking cushions and blankets until the entire space transformed into a secret hideout. Inside, we'd read stories by flashlight or watch movies, Liam curled up beside me with popcorn in his lap. It was in those moments, surrounded by the warmth of our little world, that I felt a fragile sense of peace returning. One autumn afternoon, we sat on the porch together, watching the leaves drift lazily from the trees. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from a nearby chimney. Liam sat cross-legged beside me, a steaming mug of hot chocolate cradled in his hands. "Daddy," he said, his voice soft. "Yeah, buddy?" I replied, glancing at him. "Are we going to be okay?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I set my own mug down and turned to him, seeing the uncertainty in his eyes, the kind no child should ever have to feel. I pulled him into a hug, ruffling his hair as he leaned against me. "Yeah, buddy," I said, my voice steady. "We're going to be more than okay." He looked up at me, his expression searching. "Promise?" "I promise," I said firmly, holding his gaze. For the first time in what felt like forever, I believed it. I wasn't just saying it for his sake. I truly felt it. We were healing, together, one day at a time. The weeks turned into months, and with every passing day, our lives grew brighter. Liam started to thrive at school again, bringing home drawings and stories he'd proudly share over dinner. I found myself rediscovering parts of myself I thought I'd lost. Hobbies like running, which became a way to clear my mind, and photography, which I used to capture the little moments that made life beautiful again. One evening, as I tucked Liam into bed, he grabbed my hand and held it tightly. "I love you, Daddy," he said, his voice thick with sleep. "I love you too, buddy," I replied, brushing his hair back. As I stood in the doorway, watching him drift off, I realized that the storm we'd weathered had only made our bond stronger. The news came quietly, almost as an afterthought. I was sorting through Liam's homework at the kitchen table when my phone buzzed with an international alert from a news app one hadn't used in months. The headline was short, almost clinical. Asterisk, American woman arrested in Turkey for drug possession. Asterisk. My breath hitched as I tapped the notification, the article loading painfully slow. When it finally appeared, there was no mistaking the photo. It was Elena, her once confident demeanor now replaced by a weary, hollow expression. Her hair was pulled back tightly, her face pale and drawn. The article detailed her arrest during a raid on an apartment tied to Hassan's associates. Drugs had been found, hidden among Hassan's belongings, and Elena was implicated. The charges were severe, the kind that came with harsh consequences in a country like Turkey. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. There was no satisfaction in seeing her like this, no triumph in knowing her choices had led her here. All I felt was relief. Relief that Liam was far from the chaos she had created, safe and happy in the life we were building together. I put the phone down and looked at Liam, who was sitting cross-legged on the living room rug, coloring a picture of a dinosaur. He glanced up and grinned. "What do you think, Daddy? Does it look like a T-Rex?" "It looks perfect, buddy," I said, my voice steady. "Absolutely perfect." As the months passed, The weight of everything Elena had done began to fade, replaced by the quiet joy of a simpler life. I threw myself into work, finding new purpose in projects I was passionate about, and started connecting with people again. One Saturday, Liam and I attended a neighborhood block party. It was one of those crisp spring afternoons where the air smelled like freshly cut grass and grilling burgers. While Liam played tag with the other kids, I found myself chatting with a group of neighbors, people I'd barely had time to know before. One woman, Sarah, was particularly kind. She was a single mom with a daughter in Liam's grade, and we spent the afternoon exchanging stories about the chaos of parenting. There was something easy and genuine about her smile, the way she listened without judgment. It was refreshing, like stepping into the sunlight after a long, dark winter. Over time, I began to let myself enjoy these small moments. A dinner with friends here, a day at the park there. I wasn't looking for anything serious, but I started to realize that happiness didn't have to be tied to a picture-perfect marriage. It could be found in the little things, the laughter of a child, the warmth of a good conversation, the satisfaction of rebuilding a life on your own terms. Elena reached out once, through a lawyer, asking for contact with Liam. My answer was simple: no. She had made her choices, and Liam and I deserved the chance to move forward without her lingering influence. One evening, as I tucked Liam into bed, he looked up at me with his big, curious eyes. "Daddy," he said, "are we happy now?" I smiled, brushing his hair back. "Yeah, buddy," I said. "We're happy, and it's going to keep getting better." "Good," he said with a yawn. "I like it when we're happy." I sat there for a moment after he fell asleep, the soft sound of his breathing filling the room. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt completely at peace. Elena's story was no longer ours. It was a chapter closed, a lesson learned. Liam and I were writing a new story now, one filled with love, resilience, and the quiet triumph of starting over. And as I sat there, watching the moonlight spill across the room, I realized that this wasn't just the end of something. It was the beginning of everything. How would you react if someone you trusted completely shattered your life with a single message? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to Cheating Storytelling for more gripping real-life tales. Catch you in the next video.